We are.
We are live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in the Tuesday Spring Live, our weekly appointment, where me and Candice, we share with you tips and insight about the topic of the week. So this week, we choose talk and to put our attention on cycle awareness. Cycle awareness is something we hear a lot in the, let's say, women well-being industry. But what does actually mean? And sometimes is also link and talk through by coach and people that work in this field. Oh, let go with this living according with your cycle make you live in the flow. But what this actually means in practice, because it seems a bit hippie, I was saying in the post, like, what does it mean work in the flow? Live like being in flow. And but in my experience, and also Candice she will share this, is something that is like something you arrive at a certain point to experience. There is a work to do and some a lot of things to pay attention to that you get used to as you become more curious about yourself and what's happening with your cycle. So today, we want just to give you an overall view of what we think are the most important cycle, or the basic at least. They are sleeping, food, and menstrual cycle. For the women, they are not menstruate anymore. Anyways, we are still cyclical beings, and we can relate it to the moon cycle. Like my teacher of menstrual therapy was always saying that. So we still have little hormonal shift. Obviously, they are not so big, but still there is something happening there. So we will focus on this, and it's gonna, obviously today is gonna be a short time, but we will have a webinar on the 19th of April, exactly on this topic, 1 hour and a half length, where we will bring you through how I can manage my nervous system, my stress system, noticing my cycle awareness, my cycle, and plan accordingly with my cycle. So if you are interested in this topic, you will have an overview and really tips and tricks on the topic on the 19th of April. But for now, let's focus on these three main cycles. Candice, do you want to go and dive a bit more into these three?
Sure. Well, let's start with, so we're going to talk about the food, the sleep, and the menstrual cycle. A cycle in general, just as preamble, has the beginning, has the middle bit, has an ending, and then often a pause before it starts again. So that pause is part of the cycle typically, which is often considered the rest phase. So when we look at different cycles, so we could talk about day and night, we can talk about dawn as the beginning of the cycle, then we have midday, then we have evening, and then nighttime where we're resting. Part of looking at that cycle is noticing yourself in that cycle. So for your energy in the day, where am I most energetic? What happens in the morning for me versus early afternoon versus evening? And then there's sleep. And then sleep itself, which is kind of out of the big phase of the cycle of the beginning, middle, end, and rest. Sleep would be kind of that rest phase of that cycle. Sleep also has its own can of worms itself in terms of the hormones and the things that are produced as you're sleeping. So sleep itself, there's cycles within cycles. Sleep itself is its own cycle. So when do you go to bed? What happens during the night? And then as you're waking up. And so there's all of these components with day, night, and the sleep cycle. So as you're starting to become aware, what time of day for me am I most energetic? What time of day for me am I most fatigued? What time in the evening is it best for me to go to bed to get the best sleep cycle for myself? And what time of morning is the best for me to feel most energetic in the day? So for me, my best time of day is like 5:30 in the morning till late morning, early afternoon. That's for me the peak of when I feel my most energy and when I'm most creative. And so I try to structure my day in terms of doing business stuff, seeing clients within kind of the parameters of better in the morning, less in the afternoon. And for sleep, for me, typically like lights out at around 9 o'clock, and then I get up around 5 in the morning. If I tend to sleep later, there tends to be this other thing that happens where more fatigue sets in. So it's an interesting shift. And we all have different variants of that. Some of you may be night owls, where going to bed at 9 would seem like the most ridiculous thing in the world. And prefer to stay up later and then sleep later. And maybe your best time of day might be a little shifted. Who knows? Anyway, so just part of the homework is to notice what feels best for you. Like, what is your rhythm within that? We're all going to vary slightly. So Julie, I don't know what I know you said 6 to 7 hours for you for sleep is good, but do you have a preference in terms of quality within that time for you that shows up?
Yeah, I really need 11 to 6 is my actual perfect time. Is where I sleep as a kid. And then I'm 11-6 is usually mine.
Mm-hmm.
And about food, food. So food, there is about time, quantity, I would say. So when is the best time? Quantity of food. I need more or less, more protein, more carbs. What kind of food I need? I need to eat small quantity during the day. I need to eat big quantities, but less time during the day. Food is actually one of these cycles that is really difficult it takes time. It's not difficult, takes time to integrate in your life and really pay attention, because if sleeping, I mean, obviously, if you are, for example, anxious, maybe your sleeping is getting worse, but eating is something that's trigger a lot of emotion, a lot of things, because it's also a social thing. So there is a lot there, and it's one of my most passionate topic. But for today, we can say, let's pay attention to time, quantity, and what appealed to me during the day. So, for example, I love eat pasta at lunch. For me, it's the best thing. And I love to have food in between 8 and 2 during the day. The dinner depends, like, I'm Italian, so obviously if I have to socialize, I know the dinner is the most important meal, and so I will do it. But I'm not a big fan of dinner, because then my digestion is also that before I was better, but now that I'm becoming old, depends. And so, for example, there is a lot into the food cycle. And with burnout, that is really, as sleeping, they get really important because they support us with energy. They really feed us, or they can exactly deprivate us. or drain us down, no, if you don't eat the right food at the same. So yes. And then there is, do you want Candice to take?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about how,
how
yeah.
the food.
Yeah, I wanted to just add a piece there. I was thinking about it more for myself in terms of like looking at the patterns, and part of, for me, which is contrary to a lot of like popular opinion, and also well, there's a lot of great studies on like different types of food combining and things like that.
Yes.
But for me, it's like eating right away in the morning. I don't feel so hungry. And then when I'm hungry, for me, like protein for breakfast and lunch are like really key. And then dinner for me, which is usually more around 5, since having kids, feels like that's when I like want more carbohydrates, which gives me a little bit more energy in the evening to play with my kids. And then that's it. And then I'm done. But it used to be opposite for me until I was pregnant and had kids, where I needed to eat right away, and a carbohydrate breakfast, like a mix of carbs and like oatmeal and whatever. And so it's just interesting. It can change over time as well. And then figuring out for me what worked, I experimented a lot. Like, what are the things, what are the combinations where I feel good and I feel stable in my emotions, in my blood sugar regulation. And it's not necessarily popular. It's still healthy. I'm not eating weird things, but it may look kind of weird to some people. But honestly, I'm still meeting all my nutritional requirements. It's just set out differently. And so pay attention to that for yourself.
And you hit a super important point to me, that it, like, how much, like, it is, maybe you say is maybe unpopular, but it works for me. And it's actually like one of the things like that I love. And I think that is why embodiment is such a unique approach and really highlights you as a unique person, is that your formula, I mean, can be unpopular, can be that go against all the, you know, the dietists, the nutrition. You have to. No, if it doesn't work, doesn't work. And it might be the work for a period and then doesn't work anymore. No, but
yeah.
If we really attune to our body, we can actually understand what works for that precise moment, or for that precise week or moment of our life. So, and then the other thing that I think that is for us women really a basic to pay attention to is menstrual cycle, because the hormonal dance that we have every month really influence our cycle and how we play in the world. And this is not hippie stuff. This is actually like, I know that there is a lot out there about archetypes, goddess, and how your spiritual are like. And I kind of also love some of this stuff, because there are women out there that do amazing job on this, and there is some magic still, I think, in our menstrual cycle, absolutely. But there is also really, and you can add more about that, because I mean, for your expertise about this and hormonal balance and everything, you can really, I think, talk about this for ages. But how much is important knowing what day of my cycle I'm in? To me, really was game changer after I stopped the anticonceptional. That it was really a game changer, because I started to really attune into my energy, and I was like, wow, like great, like when I'm ovulating, I'm really like out there, and sometimes I'm also dangerous because I'm too much out there. But and then how this energy just becomes like slower and different, and then I enter this phase where I want to eat all the fridge. So there is so much to track down about every month in our cycle, and how life gets into our cycle, and how we get into our cycle, and how we can surf our menstrual cycle, having a healthy relationship with that, because at the end is like really can be. There was one of my teachers that was always saying, you can dance with your hormone or you can be slave of your hormones. What's your choice? And I think that is very powerful what she was teaching us. But
Yes.
do you want to add?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about the menstrual cycle in terms of the different phases. And it's how I see it, there's sort of these 3 to 4 phases. So you've got your period, which is often considered kind of day one of your cycle when you first start to have a menstrual flow. And for women, with the phases of the moon, Julia, it's the new moon that goes with that? Yeah, okay. For those that don't have a cycle. So that there's the bleed time, which for anyone is really like 4 to 7 days. This, in my experience clinically, a lot of women feel differently here. So for some, they have a lot of energy, like it's instant relief. The bleed comes and they're like, woohoo! For other women, it's like, oh my God, the world has come to an end. I feel terrible. And if you're paying attention to moon phase, if you don't have a cycle, start to notice, mark on your calendar, this is new moon. How are you going to feel in that cycle? Because this is the cycle I think I see most different for every woman. As the bleeding stops and you move into that second phase, period's done, you're working your way to ovulation. I would say consistently, I see more women have energy, and this is really the creative time, the time that most women feel like they want to put themselves out there. They're okay to be seen more, ideas and projects come. And just from an evolutionary perspective, because we come from a hunter and gatherer society, or just that, procreation was important for our species at the time. And so there is definitely an increase in desire, an increase in wanting to socialize. And even physically, I think a lot of women feel more attractive during that phase. So, if you had the opportunity to plan webinars or meetings, projects, or things like that's a great time, because 1, you're probably going to like people a whole lot more, and 2, you're going to be like, I look amazing. So there's that phase. Post ovulation, different for different women. Some women, again, that whole phase after ovulation can be really fatiguing, but the few days after ovulation, again, it gets a bit wonky. And how do women feel? So you have to pay attention to that for yourself. And then the lead up to the few days before the period is, I would say, a deep fatigue for a lot of women. I think that's pretty consistent. I see a lot more food cravings show up in that time. And some women have different, like some women don't have an appetite and some women want to eat the fridge. So again, it's a little bit different. And all of that tracks with your hormones, what's happening. So again, the phases of the moon, from new moon to full moon, you could phase that out into many phases if you want, but paying attention to what you're noticing in each of those phases. So it's not one standard textbook. We all feel this way. Again, it's like, I feel this way, but starting to notice how you do feel is really important, because planning around that, which I think we'll dive into a little bit next, is really helpful in managing burnout, because you can use the phases where you have more energy to your advantage, and the phases where your body is crying for more rest to be able to rest more during those phases. So how do you plan, Julia, for yourself with the cycle?
Obviously, when I was working, because now there is a thing, like obviously capitalism is not cycle awareness friendly.
Very true.
So when I was working as chef, no one was really pay attention to me, and I wasn't able. I was usually taking anti-painkiller, and I was suffering. And sometimes during my bleeding period, I was staying home. So, but then I start also, then things change, and I also decide to change part of my life around that. And now I, for sure, well, I keep a calendar of my menstrual cycle, and for me is key to actually know how I can move things around, and also how my diet go with that, and the times of sleeping, because there are all, to me, everything is linked to that awareness about my menstrual cycle, that energy that is then linked to the food and the sleep. So I used to do a lot of work, like keeping track of everything. Now is more integrated into me. So it's something that come, and where is the flow come? Is when you integrate the practice in a way that is natural. Like you really, your body start to pay attention naturally to something. But obviously you have to train your body to pay attention and to really say, oh, well, and so you will become attuned to sign that your body will give you. And so at the end is what embodiment is.
Yeah.
You in the relationship with your body and the sign that your body needs and the needs. But obviously it's not overwhelming anymore. It's just you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes. So the first step is
the last thing, but because we don't, for you, these become overwhelming, we will guide you into steps in the webinar to just really learn how to do it. So don't miss the webinar. And sorry, can I interrupt you?
Oh, yes, I was going to say, I mean, you can start, I think for us, our preference for you would be to start to pay attention to these things. And we're going to pop, I think, into the Facebook group a little chart for you with a few things to start to notice. So one, if you have a cycle, where is your cycle? Where are you at in your cycle, your energy levels and your hunger levels? Because the one thing we also didn't talk about with food is listening more to, I'm supposed to eat breakfast at this time and lunch at this time, and instead of what are the cues your body's giving you? When are you actually hungry? And maybe it's at a weird time of day, but that's your hungry time. And if you ate at that time, what would that do for you if you have the opportunity? Again, we're structured in a weird, most of us 9 to 5 day, but there is subtle things you can do within those days that are supportive of your cycle. So it doesn't mean you have to go live in the red tent for a week when you have your period, because that's not practical. But maybe there's things that feel more resourcing for you at the time. So maybe it's, instead of, if you have a yoga practice, maybe instead of doing something more power yoga based, you focus on more yin for that week. Or maybe it's an extra walk in nature. Or maybe for me, it might be skipping a martial arts class that's at 5 a.m. to have an extra hour of sleep. And maybe it's, can I take 30 seconds at lunch just to sit quietly? So there's different things you can do. It doesn't have to be that you're revolutionizing your whole life and we're all going to march down the street and change society. What things can you? But you have to start with noticing what you're doing first before you can get to that point. I mean, great if you want to march down the street and change society. I will be there. You guys plan that and I'll show up.
So yes, there is so much to say around this topic that I'm really excited that we're going to do this webinar.
Me too. Me too. Yes. So we'll write probably tonight or tomorrow the little homework steps. We'll put a chart in for you so you can start to notice. And then with the noticing and the awareness comes the ability to then make a choice in how you want to manage all of these cycles and what feels good to you.
And always start small. So remember, little things every day. That is the, yes. I think that something happened in this connection.
I think
that's
my Wi-Fi.
Your Wi-Fi, yeah. I think that Vabbè.
Yeah.
we were already come to a closure. So
All right.
yes.
I was just going to say, my Wi-Fi is doing weird things, so that's probably a good time to
Time
end.
to have a closure.
Yes.
And thank you for watching or listening or see the recording. And we will see you next Tuesday and around in the Facebook group.
Okay. Let's stop the live.
Oh my God, it was so cool what you say about the practice.